Guys, welcome back to Quick Notes with Chris. Today we're going to be talking about the book The One Thing by Gary Keller. It's a very interesting book. I highly suggest that you actually read it. It really goes well with the copulation of the book Mastery as well. There's a lot of books and it basically talks about the common trend, the one trend that a lot of successful people actually have in terms of what makes them successful. So first thing that the book talks about is how multitasking is a myth. All right? A lot of people who think they're good at multitasking, the truth is all you're doing is consistently switching between different tasks. In fact, it even goes to something that says computers simply switch between tasks so fast, right, consistently and regularly that it appears as if it's multitasking. Well, the same thing goes for humans. The fact is that we cannot actually multitask. There is no such thing. We can maybe at the very best create an automated process that we don't have to think about, but when it comes to focus, we can only focus on one thing. For example, if you pat your head on your head and then rub your tummy at one time, I can't even do it, right? All I'm doing is automating one while focusing on the other. So for example here, I'm focusing on the rub and then just patting my head. I'm focusing on the rub and then patting my head. And that's a way that it sort of success works as well. The next thing that talks about is that focus on one thing 4 hours a day. If you can focus on one, this is for the average person who's just moving into trying to become successful. A great starting point is basically utilizing 4 hours of your day to focusing on one thing. Across a period of time, eventually you will become a master class. You'll eventually become in such a good position that you will be a master across a period of time. The aim is to eventually increase that, especially if you wanted to make it your career, or you want to become a professional, but focus on one thing for 4 hours a day. And that's a great place to start. Now, so it also talks about how whenever you're developing it, focus on the now. Whenever you're creating goals, so many people look too far into the future, which I actually surprisingly agree with. If you've ever heard the quote that most people underestimate what they can do in 10 years and overestimate what they can do in one, it's very applicable here as well. So many people have, year-long goals, month-long goals, week-long goals, even day goals. But the fact is that the best way to start approaching and start hitting targets is focusing on the now. So I highly suggest once you finish this video, you actually think about what is the most productive thing that you can do right now over the next amount of free time that you have. And do that, whether it's look at more videos, develop your own personally, or start working towards a task or a skill that you're looking towards that you should be getting done. What is something that you can do now that's going to directly link towards productivity, towards achieving your goal? If you can do that on a consistent basis, you'll obviously be able to live a more productive life. So what is something that you can do right now that is going to be more productive for you in the future? Do it, all right? The next thing it talks about is that every single successful person has one thing that they've been able to do. If you're LeBron James, you focused on basketball. You're not trying to do something else with your time. And I'm talking about over a period of time, like 6 month period to a year period, right? He might switch throughout the year, but generally speaking, period of time, he was focused on one thing: basketball, 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 right? If you were Mozart, all Mozart cared about was music. He had one thing that he cared about. The only other things that he cared about was eating and sleeping. Music was the only thing that he occupied his time with. You look at Bill Gates, when he was on the come up, he was averaging 8 hours a day learning code. 8 hours a day, 7 days a week learning code, and that was the foundation of skill set in order for him to create Microsoft. So the point is that if you want to be incredibly successful, if you want to be a top tier earner, first of all, you want to be a professional, and a professional means that you're a master. And the step one to doing that is basically putting 10,000 hours in. 10,000 hours is pretty much the accumulative thing. When they asked a bunch of people when they asked a bunch of violin experts how many hours that they put in, right? They asked a bunch of teachers, they averaged about 4,000 hours. When they asked a bunch of people who were good, they said about 8,000 hours. But the consistent number amongst people who reached master class was 10,000 hours. So if you want to master one thing, you have to look towards putting in 10,000 hours towards one thing. Which brings us to the next point. What is that one thing? Well, you need to find out what it is. The easiest way to find out what it is putting yourself out there. Basically experiencing a bunch of different things, whether it's starting your own business, getting in depth about a certain project, learning a bunch of different skills, and eventually you'll accumulate a lot of different pastimes before you can actually decide what it is that you want to learn. The best thing about it is that you do have the choice. But unfortunately, you're going to become a master at one thing no matter what. As you see, these hours, this time that you're spending, they get spent no matter what. 24 hours in a day is going to happen. You can't press pause and figure it out yourself. So ask yourself, what is it that you're spending your time on? If you're working, 38 hours a week on a job, eventually you're going to become a master at that. That's going to be your profession. That's going to become the best thing that you're going to be at. So, do you want it to be? That's a great question that you need to ask yourself. Is the hours, is the time that you're spending at the moment, is that where you want it to be? If you can start to do that, then you can start actually end up understanding where it is that you want to move into the future. You see, LeBron, I always use basketball as an example, and it's just because that's obviously my sport. But the thing is that he chose at some point that was going to be his one thing that he cared about. Especially in his earlier years, he would have been putting more hours than he ever did in the rest of his life, and probably in the rest of his life to come, into the sport of basketball. Now, if you can find that and make your passion about something that's just as productive, then of course, eventually you're going to be able to make a career out of it. So focus on one thing. Right? On top of that, I really suggest you look into towards other books such as Masterclasses and Outliers. It allows you to basically understand a bunch of different examples of how it actually has nothing to do with talent. Talent is overrated. In fact, talent is potential, and everybody has potential. What it's really about is work ethic. The only talent was really just a positive attitude towards a certain skill set, right? It'll always be encompassed by someone with work ethic, someone who's willing to put in the hours, someone who has that obsession. Whatever you passionately pursue, you will possess. Whatever you become obsessive with, you will obtain. So it's all about understanding what it is that this thing that's important to you. I think that if you care about your relationship to the point that it is the number one thing in your life, you're going to have a successful one. Same thing with your business. Whatever you're spending the most hours in your life is what you're going to become best at. Then it becomes a question of, all right, who am I competing with in my industry? If you're a sports person, if you're a person who's trying to get into sports, you need to make sure that you're the hardest working person in the room. You're putting in the most efficient hours, right? Not just putting hours in doing the bare minimum, efficient hours. That's the key, right? Efficient hours on the thing that you're competing with in order to make sure that you're coming out in the top tier, right? I think that if you care a lot about business, right? Making sure that you watch the trends, understanding your market, right? You need to be putting in the hours with the clients that you do have to make sure that you have that consistent revenue, right? Or whether it's even like something as simple as your marriage, right? You need to make sure that you're putting in your time. Is it the most important thing to you? If it is, then chances are you're going to be successful at it. Those are just the rules. That's the rules of life. That's the understanding. So to summarize, multitasking is a myth, right? It's near impossible to become a master at two things at any given time. So make sure that you find one thing that you're in love with, one thing that you can become obsessed with. In fact, I wouldn't even say love with. You don't necessarily need to love it. You just need to become obsessed with it. A lot of people get those two things confused. If the result that's going to come from it is something that you care about enough, then all that matters is that it's enough to you in order to do. All right. So multitasking is a myth. The second thing is, when you're just starting out, if you're looking towards finding the thing that you do want to achieve, focus on it for at least one period of the day for 4 hours a day. Right? 4 hours a day, focus on this one thing. Eventually, you'll end up adding to that. You obviously need to add to that. If the average athlete is spending 8 hours on their craft, then of course you need to increase that 4 hours. But it's a great place to start, especially when you're learning. Next thing is focus on your now goal. Right? What can you do right now that is productive? What can you do right now that's going to get you towards achieving the thing that you want to achieve in the future, right? Years, monthly, weekly, they're also great, but the fact is if you can focus on your now goal that's going to affect your daily, your weekly, your monthly, then of course it's going to, that you're going to hit it. If you leave everything towards the last minute, then you won't know until that last minute. If you focus on the now, you'll understand the types of results that you can get from the effort that you're putting in straight away. The next thing is that every successful person over every single industry at some point had one thing that they focus on. Duplicate that within yourself. Eventually, success is going to become a matter of time. Become a master and you'll earn a professional's income. The next thing is that, well, this one's a little bit interesting and a little bit controversial, but forget balance. Balance is something that's just going to get in the way. Balance is something that if you want to be incredibly successful, you're going to have to throw out the window. Excess is going to create an excess of money. Now, if that's not for you, of course, balance is obviously something that you should definitely look towards. But if you value becoming very incredibly successful as something, I'm talking, a 7-figure earner, you're going to have to throw balance out the window. You're going to have to make sacrifices. Majority of your time, I'm talking at least 8 hours of the day, needs to be spent on the thing that's going to on the thing that you want to become an expert at, on that thing that you want to become a masterclass at. If you dabble, you're going to get dabbling at results. If you're obsessive, if you treat it like a professional, the same way someone who would be earning or top earning in the company, you're going to reap the benefits of that. And finally, figure out that one thing, right? You want to look towards, jump into a bunch of different industries, spend your time in places that you normally haven't, figure out what it is that you want. Anyways, guys, that's it for The One Thing by Gary Keller, but don't let's stop there. Even though we have a bunch of other quick notes coming up, don't stop there. Keep looking towards putting yourself in a better position for financial success. We do have a lot of other videos on the channel, so if you like what we're talking about and the new format, like, comment, subscribe, share. And other than that, guys, I'll see you in the next video.